In this month's episode of Check the News, we talk about bankruptcy, the benefits of AI, and punching journalists. Well, welcome back to Check the News, episode 4. I'm here with two of my very good friends, and we're here to talk about global news, Aussie news, and then to put that through the lenses of small business and the kingdom. And we hope that by kind of taking news and pulling these topics apart and bouncing them around, that you'll be able to get handles on some business wisdom to apply to your business. It is great to have Mark Bilton back. He is affectionately known as the Apostle, not necessarily because he's the wisest, just because he's the oldest. And then we have the Bishop, Dave Balestri, back again. It is so good to chat about this with you guys. All jokes aside, you're both very wise, very kingdom, and you're very knowledgeable in the business world. So I appreciate you. In the comments, guys, as this show is unfolding, tell me the stuff that these boys are saying that you really resonate, and I'll make sure that feedback gets back to them because I know they're playing a good part in your story. All right, well, let's look at some business news. Let's start with the overarching, macro economy just here for a minute. Let's pick on this one news story out of the Financial Review. Business bankruptcies are at a 25-year high. It says, and that's very bad news. I don't know that they needed that in their headline. All right. Business bankruptcies are at a 25-year high. A total of 1,131 businesses went bust in a single month, which is the largest number since 1999. Dave Balestri, what do you think this means?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could go straight into going, oh, well, it's global economics and all the rest, and it is. But I think that I want to sort of go a little bit another way and say I think some of these bankruptcies have to do with the shifting of industries in the sense of, I remember when the book writing industry, the publishing industry got decimated by Amazon and KDP and Kindle and all that came out, and Borders started to shut their books and Dymocks and all these other business models. I understand that there are definitely pressures. We see that in the building industries and all the rest. But I think what we're also seeing, Wes, is I think we're seeing a shift in the way certain business models have been and run for the last couple of decades. And I think technology and other factors are disrupting them greatly, which is really important in the sense of keeping our eyes. I think the lesson for us here is that the thought of keeping our eyes not just on our business model, but what's coming down the pipeline. And while I don't go and do all my market research on my competitors, I'm also not trying to be naive as to, what's growing or what's coming together in the marketplace. I think that's contributing on top of global economics.
Yeah, I completely agree. Mark, you tend to see things from a slightly bigger perspective, business-wise, than I do, because I'm in there with the small business guys. Why don't you speak into that? What do you think is contributing to this?
Well, I agree with David that businesses need to be dynamic because the environment changes and it's changing very quickly, and those that don't change don't get to compete. So there's an importance to remain innovative and agile and those things. So I agree with what you're saying there, David. And we're very much in the midst of all sorts of disruption, particularly from a technology and generational perspective. So I think those things are really, really important. These numbers are high, and there's a couple of obvious things about what's driving that. High inflation, high labour costs, anything that's consumer facing is really struggling at the moment as consumers are not. Some demographics of consumers are not spending. But also I think in those numbers is quite a lot of sort of post-COVID zombie businesses. Plus everyone's got a side hustle and a gig. There's a lot more companies around and a lot of those have disappeared. Plus you've got to have at some stage in the cycle of economics and growth a clean out for organisations that are not effective, not efficient, not providing good services, not providing good companies. So there are areas that are really tough at the moment. Construction, super hard. Retail, really hard. Food services, really, really tough. And there's some good companies in there that haven't made it through. But it's also a lot of average companies have been sort of cleaned out off the back of that rapidly changing environment. So if they're high debt, don't have pricing power, are not well differentiated, are not able to create a good margin and be well capitalized, then there's definitely significant trouble for particularly those sectors I mentioned.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, I think to both of your points, right? Like if I think about economic conditions, this is my 25th year of being in business. I've always been told that I should be scared. It doesn't matter what environment I find myself in, right? When it's bad, they say it's going to get worse. When it's good, they say it's about to get bad. When interest rates are low, they're saying it's going to be scary. It doesn't matter. Like if you go for the headlines, right, you wouldn't make any investment. So if we just cut those out for a minute, what we're seeing is we always say to people, innovate or die, right? If you don't innovate, you're going to die. And I think that's the clearing out that we're largely seeing, right? There's a lot of people that are not looking down the road at the change or haven't been looking at the changes that are coming. And so, with a tech change, you will normally see a real squish on margins. There's a lot of downward pressure on margins when tech comes along and when labor costs come up, right? That's simple maths. And so there's a lot of these people who are seeing that squeeze and they're undercapitalized and they can't navigate. The bit that I find fascinating, though, is if that is the reason why a business goes under, it's like, but isn't a business able to just like start another product or start another service or go into another vertical or go into another market? Like this is how we've got to think. And as small business people, it's funny, I don't know what the stats are on those businesses, but I bet you they skew to 90% little businesses that go under, right? Because people don't have the hope to keep going. Little businesses can pivot much easier than a big business. This is like the number one competitive advantage of a small business is that you can be an electrician today and start a plumbing business tomorrow, right? Or a hairdressing salon or a whatever. It's so simple for a small business to be going here and just add this on, right? And if that's how we approach business, right, then we limit our chances of ever being one of those stats because we can just go and chase another sector, another market, another product, another service really quite quickly. Whereas it would be tough for somebody like BHP to roll out another sideline and get some quick revenue. It's going to be really hard for them to do it, but it'd be quite easy for a small business. So I guess all of that to say, we need to always be looking much further down the line, to your point, gentlemen, about what's coming and be an earlier adopter of the change. Otherwise, we're just those stats that get eaten out at the end, right? And so if you're sitting there listening and you're seeing downward pressure on margins, you're in a business that is going to be tough with technology coming, don't just slide off into that and become a statistic. Start making changes now about other products, other services, other ideas, other innovative ways to deliver. And you could very well jump from the back of the queue to the front of the queue if you are a big enough adopter.
Yeah. It's one of those things, isn't it, Wes, that I have the greatest admiration for business people in general. I think we, especially the SME people, I think we work really hard in general. I think we're really hard workers. I think that sometimes works against us. We're so busy in it. And I know a lot of the stuff you do, Wes, is help business people say, hey, don't just be in it, be on it, be on top of it. And just that thought about having margin to look further rather than just in the grind. And I think that, to be honest, I think that when I talk to business people about their devotional life is this thing about pulling them out of the hustle, and because the hustle just locks you, and then you miss a whole bunch of things. And it's part of devotion is get out of that create some space, actually breathe, hear from God, get some wisdom, get some perspective, so that you're not just drilling into a space that is a dead end for you. And like you said, by the time then you realize you're in trouble, you just don't have the energy to pivot like what you're suggesting. You just you're looking for a rescue, which is a drama.
Yeah, that old E-Myth principle of working on the business rather than in the business and being able to separate yourself from it. Hard to do, particularly if you're small and busy and lots of things going on. Yeah. But the ability to look over the hill, to look at what are the trends that are going to impact us over the next 3 to 5 years, what does success look like in that future environment, and trying to live a little bit further down the track and understand what those innovations will be that are going to drive success. And as Christians, we have an incredible opportunity to be able to plug into the Creator who sees all those things, and we underestimate it. I think we really underestimate the ability to connect with the Father who loves us and wants us to be successful. Is taking us on a journey. The ability to be able to acknowledge Him, honor Him in our businesses, and plug into that creativity and opportunity is enormous, and we don't do it as much as perhaps we should.
How would we do it, Mark? Like, what are some of the ways that you do that? How would you suggest somebody was to start that journey of walking that out, of plugging into the Creator to get creative ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I have friends that get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and shout at God. That's not me. I do have a quiet time, and it's good to study the Word and spend time with God as a principle, staying connected. But for me, it's a walk with Him. All day, every meeting, anything that we're going in, just a chat with God all the time. And I think specifically asking Him, firstly, dedicating your business to Him and acknowledging that everything you have comes from Him and surrendering to His will for your life, and making sure that is in place, that you surrendered and willing to do what He's asking you to do. And then my assumption has been, as a Christian, if I've given my life to the Lord, then it's not unreasonable to expect to hear from Him. And so looking for those opportunities to hear from heaven might be in a dream, might be in a conversation, might be in a coincidence, or an opportunity or an idea. I mean, He can talk to us in so many different ways, but I think fundamentally the willingness to surrender and to be obedient is a kind of the next level and entry level into marketplace kingdom business.
Let's stay on that point, Dave, because I think there's a place for just general relationship with God. Thank you for everything. Everything comes from above. Appreciate you, like gratitude. But if we just to shift, like, how do I hear the voice of God specifically on a business issue? It's not a different God, right? But like, any thoughts on the kind of environment that we can create to best place ourselves to hear that clearer instruction?
Yeah, I think that's a great question and a great thought about what does it look like for what we're calling marketplace ministers, marketplace ministries, anyone, sons and daughters of God that are in the marketplace. What does it look like for us? And traditionally, when we talk about time with God, hearing the voice of God and all the rest, what we know, because how we've been coached in church world in general, is a very priest-like devotional type of understanding. But I think that we can, I think we need to push the envelope. I know I am, and a bunch of people where we go, hey, we have a spiritual board. For me, some of my companies, we have a spiritual board meeting with God. No, and people go, hang on, isn't it just, you can't do that? And it's like, no, yeah, absolutely you can, if you really believe you're in ministry here. So we do things like, we have people on some of our staff that part of their role is strategy and praying, like intercession, praying strategically into the different sectors of the company, and hearing God together. I always think, we have the mind of Christ, deliberation, actually having this thought about just saying, well, what do we feel like God's putting on our hearts as far as where He wants this enterprise to go to? It's very sort of strategic, and some people go, well, that's not intimate. And I go, no, it absolutely is. It comes out of a place of intimacy. This isn't manipulation. It comes out of love and response to the Spirit of God. I just think when you think about the voice of God through Joseph and Daniel, and even go New Testament, go Lydia, Aquila, Priscilla, God was very strategic with them. Don't go here, go here, touch this, do that. Like that wasn't unspiritual or manipulative. That was normal Christianity. I think we've made it quite inward and that's awesome intimacy. But intimacy is actually, it's grace and apostleship. Grace, power of God. Apostleship is the execution of God's grace on the earth, the outworking of it. I just think we need to become much more intentional and adventurous in this place of strategic intimacy and devotion with the Lord. I don't think he's intimidated by it.
No. And it's an expectation too, I think, isn't it? Like that if we expect to hear, we'll hear. I think he talks to us a lot.
Yeah.
And it just bounces off because we're not expecting it or don't want it, or there's just that lack of expectation of that he lead us and guide us and show us the way and show us the path.
And I wanted to chat about it that way because I feel like we can make it way more complex than it actually really is.
Yep.
Right? Like like if we have a structure, can the Lord work with it? Of course he can. He's been doing that with 8 billion people, before we turned up, right? So I would say with that, I think it's totally okay for somebody who's heard all of that and gone, yep, right, I need to engage more around my business stuff. You could literally put a 15-minute meeting in your diary once a week, and it is literally my meeting with the Lord. And some people would listen to that and they'd be like, oh, you're trying to put God in a box. Yeah, a 15-minute box, which is 15 more minutes than the box he had last week, right? Like it's okay because what's going to happen is it might just be the catalyst way to start for somebody to be able to more recognize the voice of God, to hear him 24 hours a day. But it's okay to have that kind of structure and to not overcomplicate this and just push the world aside for a minute and get his voice louder and the world quieter, just to be able to say, like Lydia, what do you want me to touch and not touch?
Yep.
And in fact, let me go so far as to say, I feel like that is the way the Lord mostly speaks, rather than like your pricing model should be 3% more for that subsection of your client. I think the Lord's like, just stop chasing that and do more of this. And I think that's really cool, because if you can start to approach your time with the Lord more like a coach away from or to, like he can really get you over to where you need to be if you pay attention.
Yeah. It's great.
Absolutely.
All right. Staying on the topic of bankruptcies, I think one of the great causes is going to be AI, and so we're going to have a conversation around the practicalities of AI. Because sure, it's a fad, right? It's going to be gone in a year. Just like Facebook's going to be gone in a year. They told me in 2007, 8, 9, 10,
This internet thing won't work.
This internet thing is a fad. This information super. Everyone wants the Britannica encyclopedia, surely, right? And here's the news headline. Nvidia, and if anybody's like living under a rock, then they wouldn't know, but Nvidia is this super fast growing company that make the technology that underwrites all of our softwares.
Yeah.
The chips that run data centers, and it's just literally a hockey stick growth, to the point where they're like the third company in history to reach a $3 trillion market cap. It took Apple up until I think 2 years ago to get there. They've done it now, and more amazing is the fact that they've added $1 trillion of market cap since January this year. We're recording this in June. In fact, it's way past that, because they hit the 3 trillion in like 2 months ago, 6 weeks ago, or something. So they're growing exponentially, which we don't really talk about Nvidia as a company. We can if you want. Mark might have some thoughts, but more around all that is evidence that this tech boom, this trend towards whatever Web 3.0, whatever it's going to end up being, is not stopping, and it's an absolute juggernaut. And there is cause for concern, I think, for 95% of businesses who really need to consider what this looks like. So first and foremost, we'll get into the ethics of it after. Let's just talk about, what is this AI monster? How fast is it coming at us? And what do we need to know? Maybe Mark, you can lead us off.
Wow, how much time have you got?
4 minutes, Mark.
It's such a for me, it's super exciting. Actually, I think there's just some enormous opportunities in the midst of this. If you bring AI and quantum computing and the ability to leverage speed and velocity in pretty much everything we do more than we've ever done in the past is an extraordinary opportunity, and then has these massive landmines in it, depending on how, where, and what it's used for, because it's applications as well as science and medicine and production and those things. It's also going to be used, it's already being used in military setting, for instance. The ability to have autonomous AI-driven weaponry is with us, and the speed of change is just phenomenal. And all the legislation is just not keeping up. Like everything is out of the box, and it's extraordinary change for everyone. In a pure business setting, we had a meeting the other day actually with a whole bunch of business leaders, and Microsoft were coming in and giving us a bit of a update on where they're at with their AI, and it's disruptive to pretty much every business model out there. So if you don't, you talked about innovate or die. This is absolutely, you've got to embrace what's going to kill you. This is coming. Get to understand how it's going to disrupt your industry and your business in particular, because it will. The other side of this, I think, is the cycles of these things that we talked about with the internet and social media and such like. You have this hype bubble. So anything that looks like a database or has any sort of machine learning on it is now an AI thing. AI is everywhere, and it's not really. And there's a lot of puffery out there as far as what's AI and what's not. And it is overhyped, and valuations will be overhyped, and they'll correct over time. But underneath that, the true adoption of and the development of AI and how it's going to change and impact what we do and how we do everything, socially as well as economically, it will be coming up underneath that. And I think that the change for this will be a faster adoption rate and faster development rate than the internet.
Yeah. And way more capital thrown at it than we saw back at the early stages of the internet. Yeah, like tons more. David, what does it all mean? And then we're going to get into some ethics of it, because I know there's some Christians who are super scared about the boogeyman of AI.
Well, I'm just thinking about the target market for this this channel, check the news and what we're talking about. I just think, there's a sense of overwhelm, this big thing's coming down the pipeline. I'm already, maxed out in my business or in the things that I'm doing. And now you're telling me I've got to pay attention to this thing, or I'm going to be irrelevant potentially in a couple of years. How do you manage that? I was just thinking as Mark was talking, I think the way to do it is this, no one is suggesting that everybody needs to be an AI expert, but I do think what needs to happen, a clever strategy here would be, you shouldn't be totally ignorant of this sector. And I think that's one of the things that fear does. Fear causes you to push away, go, no, it's evil, or it's da-da-da-da-da, or it's, or you get into this denial mode. Oh, it's a fad, it's going to go away. It's not going away. I think that what you do is you just go, let me engage it, ChatGPT, the average punter should be using some form of, whether it's the Google one, ChatGPT, the OpenAI, you should be playing with it. I know Meta has now forced us, when you do your search on Facebook, you've got the wheel there, the wheel of death, I call it. It's just, it's not great yet. I just think you don't have to be an expert, but you should be aware of it, and at least in a growing competency sense. As it gets more integrated, these companies will make it seamless or feel seamless, just like when the first Apple phone came out, and instead of having to read the manual, you literally just turned it on, and the user interface was much easier. So don't put your head in the sand. You don't have to be the industry expert, but you should be having a growing competence. Every day you wake up, the world is more digital. Like, just every day you wake up, the world is more digital. You're going to have to deal with that.
That's a good point. So if your business is not more and more digital, you're going to get left behind. That's a good marker, I think. Because obviously here's how I hear a lot of people that don't want to know, right? It'll be like a plumber who says, I'd love to see AI go and unplug a toilet, right? That's the, and I get it. Like that has a legitimate concern. But what they do is they take that somewhat truth and then they make it a reason why they're going to be okay, right? I heard somebody else say, I'd like to see them renovate a house. It's like, of course they're going to. Like they're already going to be able to manufacture everything not on site and just truck it in and bolt it together, right? Like with a robot, like that's inevitable. But, when it comes to using the plumber just as an example, it's like anything. It rolls out over time and it's a lot more time than we think. So going back to the plumber, the way that they utilize AI is because their plumbers are now costing a lot more money. So there's downward pressure on margin, right? That's just the market we find ourselves in. Where AI is going to play its role is instead of 2 admin staff, you need 1. Or instead of a full-time admin staff, you can put them on 30 hours a week because the accounting and the bookkeeping is all going to be done by AI, right? That's where the benefits are, right? Anything that is routine as a task, right, repeatable is the thing that is AI is going to be phenomenal to sit with, right? So it's not going to be like maybe the core task of your business that gets eaten out first, but it's going to be the rest of the stuff, right? So if you're still hanging on to an old business model, right, and taking it, then that's when you're going to be there going, it's too hard. Like if I think about one of the adoptions that I'm in the early stages of making, is we're going to make an app that you can get on your phone. You just go in and you can ask like Kingdom Business anything. Right. And so we will train this brain with the 700 videos, with the 16,000 hours of content that we've done, right? Put it all into a brain so that somebody can go, how do I put my prices up? And it spits my answer out for them, read to them in my voice type thing, right? That's not even that hard to do. That is literally just training ChatGPT 4 to think like me with all my data. Like, that's not even a big job, and that's where we find ourselves today, right? So I guess that was a cautionary tale to say it doesn't matter who you are out there, even if you think your business is, not going to be affected, other parts of your business will be. And it's not that new. Like before we had AI, we called it not that long ago, like big data. It's effectively a very similar kind of thing, like if you look at the financial planning sector, like that was ripe for disruption and it has been disrupted. And now you've got robo-advice, right? Which is we would call it an AI tool now, but we didn't originally because that word wasn't cool then. It was just big data and an algorithm. And it just spits out like, here's all your options, based on all of the points that we know about a human being. And now your advice is like cents in the dollar compared to having a human go and do it, right? So just to put this in there, because I got a bit of heat on the Bonza thing, I'm not suggesting that this is the right way to go or it's ideal. What we're saying is it's inevitable, whether you like it or not, right? So I think, that's a real consideration. People have to think about where it applies. And if you can get a 2% gain by adopting AI, you better start, because if you don't, you're going to end up losing your margin by sticking to the old business model. What about the ethics of it, right? A lot of Christians are scared. Is this closer to the mark of the beast, which, legitimately a lot of people think that's what it'd be. This tech thing, we're not going to be able to go anywhere. They're going to know everything about us. They're going to shut us down because we go to church. All of the things that are probably legitimate concerns, right? And Lord help us if China end up with our data. But what about you, gentlemen? Where do you think the moral, ethical issue is for a believer when it comes to this radical advancement of AI?
Well, I think it's a wonderful opportunity because there's very few opportunities to engage from a Christian perspective as far as an ethical framework. We have something, absolute truth, yes and no, black and white, and dynamics around ethics that we can demonstrate that you can actually use to program AI if you want to. So in an environment where everything is relative truth and it's, my truth, your truth, everything's a bit foggy and grey, you can't take that and put it into a system learning environment. So
you're saying adopt it, right, and shape it from the beginning instead 100%. Of just letting it happen.
True. I think in general, don't get me started on this because it's a passion point. I think in general, a lot of Christians are going, the world is evil, everything's going to hell in a handbasket. let's go and hide in our corner, build walls and throw rocks. That's how we're going to engage society, rather than getting out, getting in amongst it, understanding what their sphere of influence is, being salt and light. Like, salt is only effective when it's out sprinkled around the world doing what it's meant to do. If it's in a big bucket in the corner, it's no good to anybody. So we need to activate our vocation, engage with God in wherever we're meant to be. And I think this is a great example. There should be Christians all over this, not running away, hiding and going, oh, it's going to be the end of the world. Get into it, get in amongst it, and have influence, and bring what we have. And I think there is massive opportunity in here from a Christian ethics perspective. There's a guy I'm actually going to interview on my podcast, Dr. Henderson. He's got a PhD in AI ethics and theology. So super looking forward to doing that and trying to understand myself a little bit more about this. It's a big topic. I think it's a massive opportunity, and I think the worst thing we can do is just go, oh, it's all evil, horrible, and run away.
So just to be fair, because I want you to have a place to speak out freely on your theology. Do you really honestly think that when he said go into all the world, he meant all the world?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have a big brain. I just if that's what it says, that's what it is.
I love it. By the way, we're going to go to Dave in a second, but what's the handle for your podcast, please?
Lead Well, Live Well.
Lead Well, Live Well. On which platforms?
All platforms. So audio on Spotify and Apple and YouTube.
Go check it out, guys. All right, Dave. What the ethics of AI? What you're basically our on-set pastor here. Talk to us about where this lands.
Yeah, I think any faith that promotes a separation or a duality of engagement is not a biblical faith. It sounds more like Hellenistic thinking, which is Greek thinking. It's dualism. And I think that what happens is that if we allow AI to just be played out and led by the secular humanists, then we build the beast of our own abdication, to be honest. And it's like Mark was just saying before, we need some of the best and brightest and clearest minds, I'm talking from a kingdom Christian perspective, to be fully engaged here. I think we need to encourage our young people coming through to see the future as it is coming down the pipeline and be positioned powerfully. Could you imagine what would have happened if 30 or 40 years ago, instead of sending our best and brightest and saying to them, the only place you can go is a Bible college to learn how to be a preacher, instead we sent them to the universities, and got them to really flesh out or thrash out what they were passionate about. And we had our civic leaders, our business leaders, our, full of champions, which, by the way, the church used to do that in the 14, 15 and 1600s. The church used to actually underwrite it financially, underwrite the arts and the sciences, and anyone that they saw genius in, they would give scholarships to, believe it or not. So we used to do that. We don't do that anymore. We only give scholarships to the ones who want to go to Bible college and become missionaries in Africa or some other nation. We shouldn't stop doing that. We should stop only doing that and really come back to this thing about what does it look like to create a system where we can really become the thought and shape leaders. Listen, AI is part of the evolution. There's something else. There's quantum computing after that. There'll be something else after that. I just think we need full engagement, not separation from it.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it's funny. We know how to celebrate what it looks like to pay the price to go to Bible college and start a church and grind one out and build a big one. Like, we know how to celebrate that paying the price. But hopefully over time we can get more people to understand that you can actually pay the price to build a business and build a big one and pay that price and be at the forefront of technology and innovation and basically shaping these. Because I wonder how the world, to your point, Dave, I wonder how the world would look today if 30, 40 years ago, like you said, we sent our best and brightest off to Harvard or wherever, and made sure they didn't lose their faith in the first 2 weeks of university. And what would happen? It's hypothetical, but what if, Facebook and Twitter and Google, what would the landscape be today if they were owned by people who had a faith? It doesn't mean that all those platforms have Jesus fishes on them, right? But I guess some of the more sinister side of those platforms would not have been given any airtime, right? And so now we can't have those 30, 40 years back, but we can be talking to people today who are sitting there going, you know what? I want to be somebody who builds something great in my lifetime, whether they're young enough to be somebody that can shape it, or whether they are young enough that they've only got a handful of years left that they can build something that somebody else can build off to keep moving. But, go into all the world is all the people groups of the world. And one of those people groups is the business world. So it would make sense that people want to go there.
Yeah, agreed.
A quick topic, and this one I know is really passionate for you, Dave. So a certain country has turned around some of its data points for good, and I'll let you speak into it. But ultimately, prayer works. Talk to us about this news headline, Dave.
Yeah, it was a surprising, dramatic interview that dropped this week. The nation in question is El Salvador, and the interview was with the sitting president, whose name is Nayib Bukele. He's been in the news the last several years. There's been sound bites coming through about him having to deal with a massive problem of violence in his nation. As a matter of fact, 3 years ago, El Salvador was officially the murder capital of the world, terrorized by really gangs, cartels, all the rest. They had somewhere in the vicinity of 70,000 gang members of a nation of only 6 million people. You can imagine 70,000 gang members that were terrorizing every sector of society. And so 3 years later, now 2021 to 24, now El Salvador is officially, from a data point perspective, the safest country in the Western Hemisphere, safer than Canada per head per capita when you do the analysis, which is, sounds crazy. It sounds like in 3 years, how do you go from murder capital of the world to safest country in the Western Hemisphere? That's an intriguing story. And so there was an interview this week by Tucker Carlson, who interviewed the sitting president and asked him to tell the story. I saw it this morning, 1.6 million views, which isn't too bad in the last 3 days, I think it is. The story's intriguing because the way the president answers Tucker is he says to him, so Tucker says, how did you turn it around? And he said, well, I've got an official answer and I've got an unofficial answer. Which one would you like? And he said, well, give me both. And he said, well, the official answer is we had a 6-point strategy. And he talks about they doubled their army and then used weaponized their army, built prisons, and then used the army as the police force to round up these criminals. And he said, he said, but even with that strategy, he said, you can't, he says, I can't contribute it to that. He said, the unofficial statement is that, he said, we had this proposal put before us. He said, so myself and my core cabinet, we went to prayer, which Tucker starts to laugh. And he said, hang on, are you telling me that the cabinet prayed? And he said, well, we're a secular nation. He said, but for myself and my core cabinet, we believe in God. He said, we prayed. We actually knew that it was mission impossible. And he said, the only way we knew to achieve mission impossible was through prayer. And so that's, some of the outcomes are, as they began arresting this cartel that were murdering people, Within 3 years, only eight military and frontline government people were killed in the arrest of close to 70,000 people, and the shifting of that nation. So I don't know. It's one of those things in the 90s, Wes, before you came to Christ, there were these transformation videos. I don't know if you ever saw them, but they were these amazing videos that talked about the transforming of regions, South America, this sort of thing, where prayer and calling on God and asking for a breakthrough began to transform regions. And it seemed like a rerun of that this week, but just present day.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's almost like we wrestle not against flesh and blood, right?
He quotes that in the interview, believe it or not.
Well, I would believe it because it's probably like the scripture that maps to the outcome, right? You know, like we can't occupy in the natural what we haven't fought for in the spirit. Right? That's everybody, right? Like, so come back to your own small business. You've got issues in your business. If you're not contending in the spirit and you're just contending in the natural, it'll be like boxing the wind, right? You'll pick every fight under the sun, you'll go nowhere, you're boxing nothing, and you'll tire yourself out. If we can contend first in the spirit, right, and crack it open, if you want a cool term, then we can occupy that, you know, in the natural. But it'll never be the other way around. And that's a cool story about turning around an entire culture in 3 years. You know, that's.
I think if he would have said, we prayed and sat on our hands and a miracle happened, okay, that's amazing. I would have struggled to resonate with that as much. But he said, we prayed, and then we prayed, we contended there, and then we went and executed the plan. You know, which I think is important for business people. It's not about, should I be strategic or should I pray? Yes. And probably pray first. Allow strategy to be shaped and molded out of a place of prayer, divine wisdom, and overwhelmed or undergirded in prayer. And then, but you've got to go and execute, because to pray and do nothing is not the full spectrum of that reality. I think the interview brought that out. Mark, did you see that interview?
I did, and it's fantastic. Actually, it was so good. It's just a miracle, absolute miracle. And I want to echo what you were saying on that last point, because he didn't just sort of pray and do nothing. Like, sometimes we think if we invite God in, if we're operating in faith, we sort of have to park our intellect, park our capability, park hard work, and it's just not like that. We co-labor with God. And I thought he was a great example of an authentic, humble person who went like, this is just impossible. We're facing massive odds. We're going to lose a lot of people. We need to pray, but we've got a plan. And I love that they executed their plan. They still doubled their military, went out and got them the best weaponry and ways of dealing with things. And they had a plan. They thought it through. They were smart, capable. They had really good people onto it. But the outcome was miraculous. Surrendered to God, committed to Him, under His authority. And also, I think in this case, because one of the large gangs was satanic, openly satanic, doing child sacrifice and doing a whole bunch of other things. This was just open spiritual warfare going on as well. So there's, it was good and evil, just to the nth degree. And so the fact that he's been able to do that, and it's garnered so much global attention, I think is phenomenal.
It's hardly going to be hard, right, to get God's attention to want to go and contend for that. It's the very thing he's been up against since Adam and Eve, right? Like, it's like I'm going to beg God to give me a strategy to like go and stand against this oppressor. It's like, no, That's all God's ever wanted, is for us to step in the gap and actually, do the work. He says, see all the things that I did, greater things you will go do. Out of your belly, right, will flow. So it's meant to be from us that we go and go and do those things. And Jesus himself had a strategy, right? He said, 2 by 2, get out there, go to a city. If they don't receive you, dust yourself off, move on. It was a strategy to go and create change. It wasn't Jesus going, let's hang out in the upper room, or let's just hang out here having dinner and we'll pray about it, right? He is a God of strategy. And it's an epic story. All right, completely different topic. This one's maybe just a little bit more fun. A fellow by the name of Peter Costello, who you may know as a former treasurer of Australia. He has been serving on the board of Nine Entertainment, who have been in a lot of hot water lately. He decided to get into an altercation at Canberra Airport with a journalist, and it was being filmed. And so basically this journalist gets all up in his face, asking him some questions. He doesn't know how to hold his emotions, ends up charging into the guy, pushing him over into the ground. I do feel a little bit like the journalist was a soccer player, because he rolled around making it way worse than it really was. But it's all been caught on camera, and now the guy has to stand down. All right. So, it cannot be good for Nine after their few woes they've had in the media. But this speaks to us being able to keep our emotions in check, right? And as a small business person, it's a massive roller coaster, right, of keeping this together. So, through the lenses of our own leadership, what would you say about the Peter story?
Yeah, I think he needed a holiday, Wes. Business people, public people, it's pressure, right? And rightly so. It's what we do. It's what we manage, and we need to do that every day. And I take my hat off to people in the limelight in these places, and including business people. You're managing pressure. And I think that one of the things that everybody can have a bad day. He obviously snapped, and there'd be a myriad of reasons why he snapped. But I think for me, one of the thoughts that I had, because I was probably on his side, not the reporter's side. I was a bit annoyed by the reporter getting up in his grill, and we all want to lash out at some point. But there's this vulnerability about running tired. I don't know whether he holidays well, but I just see a lot of business people running tired a lot, and their measure gets short. We get short with the staff, short with suppliers, short with the decision-making processes, and then we get in trouble. And maybe we're not pushing a reporter over in Canberra Airport, but maybe we're making a dumb call and burning, 20 grand or burning 6 months, because we were running tight and we didn't learn how to manage ourselves as pressure carriers. I think that's a real problem, to be honest.
Mark?
I don't like the journalist. Yes, I agree.
It was a bit of a low act, wasn't it?
Definitely not a rugby player, that's for sure. Media, can I comment on the media first? I think everything's about short-term sensationalism, trying to get click tag, everything's about getting that little... And they do tend to hassle in groups of everybody and ask questions that aren't going to be answered, and they're just annoying. And yet in the midst of that, there's some wonderful journalists who do proper investigative journalism and really seek the truth and articulate that well. So, look, Costello's been around for a long time, longest serving treasurer under Howard, an esteemed gentleman in that way, and has done some great things for Australia for a long period of time. Probably deserves a little bit more respect than just being sort of hassled with an iPhone. Did he shove him? Probably. Was it a bad thing to do? Yes, but very understandable under the circumstances. But I guess, if we're in positions of authority, then we are held to account, and we need to make sure we have enough things in our lives to keep ourselves centered and focused and emotionally in control. We're just held to a higher standard. So yeah, I feel sorry for him. I think it could have been just a complete setup, the whole thing.
Yeah. Yes, and so I think that it was actually probably likely a complete setup, right? I still think that's reason, to your point, Mark, where we have to hold ourselves to a higher standard. This is where we have to get ourselves to the point where we can hold the emotion. You don't have to hold it forever. Like, you get behind your own doors and process it how you need to process it, right? But or take up boxing or something, but just like, you can't do it like that. And so we're talking about Costello, Canberra Airport, right? National news. But I see this in a really micro way with small business owners who are not holidaying well, to Dave's point, who are on the rev limiter, they're maxed, and then one of their team members does the wrong thing. And we call it 0 to 100. They do nothing, snap, right? They don't have a mechanism for processing early issues and chatting about things, right? And so, it's like, we're not shoving people in an airport, but we're probably snapping at our team member, right? And like, you've spent 6 months grooming them, you've kind of got them ready, you've put up with some stuff, you have a bad day, bang, you've wasted that time and money, and you've got to go do it again. All because you didn't know how to handle and hold your own emotions. And so, I think it's a lesson for everybody, actually, around becoming spiritually tougher, pressure tougher, like, because in a world of mental health crisis, I do think that when you reach your capacity as a human, like you're holding it together, it's actually a good place, because it does build capacity in you. They're good opportunities for you to get to the point where you're like, I'm at my max. I need to do something about this, and it shouldn't be snapping at a team member and having to go back to the drawing board, right? We have to find other ways of processing that kind of pressure.
Yeah,
for sure. Looking after number one is very important. I think particularly as Christians, sometimes, we see our vocation as serving those around us and helping them be the best they can be, and those are wonderful things. But to do that well, we have to look after number one. We need to lock in processes to make sure that we sleep well, eat right, exercise well, build good relationships at home, really maximize those things, put them in the diary, lock them out. And we all have to sprint for a season for a reason, but it needs to be within certain bounds. We can sprint and sleep. We need to find that white space in our day, in our week, in our month, in our year, and build it in and really look after number one. I think if you want to be a leader sustainably over time, you have to do that, or you're just going to burn out.
Definitely.
Is that why, Mark, you rev up your BMWs and doing burnouts at Oran Park? Is that
absolutely?
Is that your outlet?
That's great. Yeah, I'm not shoving journalists, saying I'm pushing horsepower.
There's no replacement for displacement, they say. So that's a thing.
That is true. Turbocharging, supercharging.
Maybe we should
not get into that debate.
No, maybe we should all do that one day. We'd all just go to the track and do a check the news from the track side.
Sounds good. Let's do that.
And we can interview you from my rear vision mirror, and we'll just it's been great hanging out with you, gentlemen. Hey, Dave, would you do us a favor and pray for us? Not just us, but obviously the small business community that are listening to this show.
Yeah. Father, we just thank you that you're with us, God. You're in our future, you're in our past, you're in our present. God, we thank you. We've been touching these news headlines, but nothing's new to you. You know it before it happens. And Father, we just thank you that we're walking this out together, Lord. We are connected to you. Thank you for the super weapon of prayer. Thank you for your love that is just ever towards us. Thank you that we're on mission. We're on mandate. God, you're leading us into this brave new frontier, and our eyes are open, our hearts are open, our spirits are open. Father, we thank you for your undergird and your great leadership in this day, in this hour, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. So good. What's the handles again to find you? Mark, give us the handle so someone can find you.
leadwelllivewell.com.au and mondaymovement.com. So
Dave?
all the links are on those websites.
All the socials, but marketplaceinvasion.com.au. That would be the best one to grab me on.
Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed episode 4 of Check the News. Remember, I want to hear your comments. What are the things that jumped out to you? What are the things that pop? Who's your favorite person on the show? That would be great, especially if it's me. So until we meet again, I pray you go and build your business and do something great for the Lord. And we'll be back for episode 5 real soon.